this industry, Mr. Kessler, that he created, started with the idea you buy a perpetual license and you're set for life. A lot has changed, and so we're going to be talking about the different platforms. And I've got an incredible group of people up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up with what I should introduce myself first. Dave Michaels, Talking Points, and I'm going to start off with an open question and have each one of them. This is the only question I'm going to have each one of them answer. And if you can, I've got like 20 questions here, so if you can limit your response to 5 seconds, I'd appreciate that. But as we go down on this first question, briefly introduce yourself and give me an answer to the question. Does that sound good? All right. So the first question here is, these are all platform vendors or options. What are you doing to help service providers retain their customers? Let's start off with Brian.
Brian Buehler, CEO of Alianza, Pleasant Grove, Utah. Happy to be here. I think for Alianza, probably the number one thing we're doing is trying to create a full stack platform, we call it, where we can support both the legacy telco services as well as what's next. So you think kind of running this gamut between, you want business text messaging, you want cloud meetings, we can do that. But we can also be backwards compatible to support managed specialty lines, POTS lines, Resi service, whatever is running on legacy architecture that needs to be supported, that needs to find a home in the cloud, we can provide all of that from a simple and easy to use cloud-based platform. So kind of taking an end-to-end approach, legacy plus modern.
Did that answer the question?
No, maybe we'll come back to that.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
No pressure, no mic there, man.
This is a tough grader.
Yeah. So DP, introduce yourself and tell us what Cisco is doing to help service providers retain their customers.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm DP Venkatesh. I'm part of the leadership team in the collaboration business at Cisco. From a service provider perspective, wow. Could you hear me or should I go again?
It's better now.
All right, I'm DP Venkatesh, part of this collaboration leadership team at Cisco. And the question is, what are we doing to help service providers? Cisco, as you know, is a very large service provider route to market, not just for the collaboration business, but for all of Cisco. But specifically for collaboration, our focus with service providers is falls into 3 buckets. We have a very large market share in terms of existing service providers on a variety of platforms, whether they're on-prem, whether they're cloud, or they're hybrid. So our emphasis is really, and Mike talked about some of the changes that service providers are going through as an industry, is our focus is cloud first, but not cloud only. So a lot of the work we're doing with service providers is really saying, what is your business? And it's about margin contribution. So we see our service provider partners coming to us as, hey, we've got a huge Broadworks base. We have the largest base of service provider customers, both in terms of service providers as well as the end customers at Cisco. And we're working with them on what makes sense for a service provider in this margin challenge environment. So it's more about the service provider's business than it is about our products and services. So that's how we're helping service providers. Did I answer the question?
Patrick?
Patrick Sullivan, 2600 Hertz. First of all, it's funny when I look at this crowd, I feel like we're all kind of publicly challenged. So I'm not sure if that's how we got on stage or not, but thanks for having us here.
We've all pulled our hair out.
Yes. And that is the challenge of building platforms, you lose your hair quickly. So it's interesting. I think we all up here have, a UCaaS solution, a CPaaS solution, a CPaaS solution. For us, it's, we try to put everything in the same code base. So we didn't just kind of mix and match things and bring different companies together. But where we really kind of enable our partners to be successful is Mike was talking about verticals. And a lot of our partners who are really killing it right now is that they focus on a particular vertical. And the way they can do that is by using the open APIs to build something very close to what they're looking for, or what their partners are looking for. And I think when you kind of give the capabilities to focus on a vertical and focus on the actual end user experience, you're not just selling against in general, like, hey, we're priced against RingCentral, we're priced against 8x8. You're actually saying, hey, we're not even priced against these guys because no one can do what we're doing because we're focused on a very specific vertical. So from what Mike was talking about earlier, I think, for service providers, we're enabling them to go after something to differentiate themselves in that market and to be actually very successful that way.
Thanks. As representative of Microsoft, I'll be referring to my ChatGPT assistant for all the hard questions. Yeah, so Chris Carabello, I manage the Max UC operating UCaaS solution for formerly Metaswitch, now Microsoft. You know, I think, again, as all platform vendors, we have a lot of operator customers, and we have some 300 using our platform, and, you know, some are successful and some are not so successful. So those who tend to be more successful are the ones who can grow revenue and reduce costs. That's sort of the challenge, and I came from an operator before joining Metaswitch. You know, it's a challenge for every operator service provider on a day-to-day basis. How do I grow revenue? How do I reduce costs? So we continue to expand our portfolio. You know, it's starting with residential voice, consumer voice, UCaaS, business voice, CPaaS, and other applications beyond that. And then our mission at Azure for Operators is to help the operator reduce costs by moving some of their network functions from their home data centers or private clouds into the public cloud. So, you know, generally, if we can help the operator service providers continue to find ways to grow revenue, become more differentiated while reducing costs, then they'll have a long-term path to success.
Excellent. So much has changed in this industry. Almost all the original platform vendors have been acquired. The rules have changed, the competitive pressures have changed. We talked about this already. So I wanted to ask you more specific targeted questions. So starting off with Chris, you used to preach Metaswitch. Presumably you now also preach Azure Operator and Microsoft Teams. Are these zero-sum choices, is one or the other, or is there a combination here that makes sense to you?
So I don't think I even need to refer to my ChatGPT assistant for that one. Well, first off, I just maybe just a broad overview of Azure for Operators. I mean, most of this group knows Metaswitch as a UCaaS enabler to service providers, but you know, we had a large portfolio of operator network functions, IMS core functions, and a really smart engineering team who knew how to build those in a cloud-native sort of manner and containers and scalability and hypervisors associated with that. So, you know, what Microsoft was acquiring is not necessarily the UCaaS platform on its own, but the capabilities to help bring telco network functions into a telco cloud. So we were acquired along with Affirm and later on AT&T's cloud engineering team to help, and we're in the Azure group, so we're not in the Teams group, and we're you know, bringing our own network functions as well as those partners like Nokia and others to run in a hybrid or public cloud. So, you know, that will bring long-term benefits for operators. I mean, one thing we're working on is, for example, bringing our analytics platform, which used to reside on servers and is very robust. You know, we can track all the calls through the SBCs and our application servers and diagnose and troubleshoot. But you know, because of the massive amount of calling that's made, it could, you know, handle about 1 week's worth of calls. By moving that into Azure, you really have unlimited visibility and unlimited storage at much reduced cost. So there's a lot of things that we're doing with Azure for Operators and the traditional network functions, mobile edge compute, and a lot of other new capabilities that telcos are looking to bring. From a UC perspective, no, it's absolutely not a zero-sum game. You know, certainly, and you know, most of the analysts here are tracking the tremendous growth of Microsoft Teams, you know, as a function of, you know, the demands through the pandemic, but also a whole heck of a lot of innovation over the last few years. So, you know, most of our successful operators are building a Teams motion along with what they have from their platform that we deliver, which includes, again, trunking and even ISDN PRIs and all that stuff. We talk a lot about UCaaS, but we're still, depending on the region market, only about 20%, 25% penetrated to that. So you need to continue to support delivering those more legacy services that are still profitable for the operator, while also bringing these applications. I was talking to one of our operators who were here yesterday, and they have our platform for UC. A 500-employee company business moved into town. They're providing the broadband connectivity, and they said, we're all in on Teams. We want to use E5 with phone system. What can you do? Well, we have our SBC through Metaswitch that's certified with Microsoft Teams. We'll deliver direct routing on that. So we're still having operators add value to Microsoft Teams through direct routing, through Operator Connect, and really acting as an integrator for enterprises who are really trying to figure out the future of hybrid work. It's kind of a buzzword, but how enterprises are looking for, I have this office. I used to have 300 physical phones. Now I have half my employees working from home, half of them are mobile. How do I figure this all out? I've got some teams. I've got some other locations that don't really want to pay for that. So most of our successful operators look at their portfolio. They understand the needs of their enterprise customers, in this hybrid environment, and they work with them to figure it out. So absolutely, you can coexist.
Any comments on mutual exclusive choices?
I think the market, if you look at service providers in general, and Chris talked about it, is I think from Cisco, we look at it more as what's the service provider's business and how can we add value to it. So, Mike had the line of access and connectivity, then you have networking, security, and then you have applications. So you take WebEx as a platform, you could argue it's an application. We're really looking at the service provider market as they've got high margin connectivity services. They want to protect and grow that. And then we provide the networking security layer. So I think enterprises are looking for a partner who can help figure this out. Sometimes it's a cloud vendor, sometimes it's a service provider. And then in different segments, like in the SMB segment, mid-market, service provider is a very large brand. Like I see Sanjay from Vonage, they're well known, they have that market, so we add value. In other large enterprises, sometimes we'll partner with a service provider where Cisco could have more presence around networking and security, and the service provider has more on access and connectivity. So I think we look at it more as what can we do to increase the service provider's business, and then how can we fit into that. So it varies from market to market, but we're always looking at how does the service provider transition from the old school world of business to the new subscription recurring revenue. Margin profiles change, but how do you build a profitable business? That's, I think, the number one question we see with service providers.
Thank you.
Yes, and just one other kind of data point on this about kind of mutual exclusivity versus we'll call it broad market strategy. If you look at one of Allianz's anchor customers, Lumen, one of the biggest operators in North America, 3 of the 4 of us up here have solutions that are anchored inside the Lumen product offering, right? They'll take Teams to market when enterprises ask for it. They're a big WebEx partner. And then for the Lumen branded kind of mass market, Lumen Cloud Communications, it's all powered by Allianz under the hood. I think that speaks to kind of operators, they need flexibility. They need to be able to address both, I'll call it horizontally integrated or architected solutions, but also then go vertical and go deeper where they need to for specific segments. I think we're entering this world where operators are going to be driven with specific solutions based on what their customers are asking for at the upper end of the market, right? So customers are going to come in, they're absolutely going to say, we need Teams. My team's driving Teams, I want an integrated solution with Outlook. Others are going to come in with kind of a religious affinity for WebEx. We want WebEx. And for those large enterprise customers, they're going to need those solutions. And they're going to need those to be tightly integrated with broadband, security, and so forth. But then there's also, the 80% of the market that is not yet, I'll call it kind of, they're not knowledge workers. They don't look like the rest of us that spend our days in front of a screen and a webcam. They're kind of still the basic phone lines. And that's still kind of Main Street American business is still phone first, voice first, not yet text first or collab or cloud meetings first. and they're going to need a solution for that as well.
As I recall with Lumen, they came to you saying we need analog. That was the opportunity. Is that correct?
Yeah, it started with analog, but it
Yeah.
also started with this huge problem, which is like Lumen wants to be a modern techco, not a legacy telco. And in order to do that, they need to kind of jettison these old school legacy copper plants that have been kind of, let's call it, encumbering their ability to innovate. So trying to move as much as they can to the cloud while still addressing a variety of needs from a variety of vendors, I think is really important.
Patrick, you already mentioned CPaaS and CCaaS in your opening statement. It's one thing to enable these things as a platform provider, but how do you ensure that your customers know how to leverage or make use of these types of?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the traditional CPaaS people think about companies like Twilio. And Twilio kind of educated the market on what a developer API is in the telecom space. But when you go to service providers and say, hey, do you guys have developers? A lot of service providers, they don't. And some are starting to go into, we really need to. And so, as a company, we do two things. One is we really try to build an ecosystem of third-party developers that can come in and help service providers, build customizations, build integrations, kind of whatever they're looking for. And then the second part is we're also really focused on like the education, simplifying not just developer APIs, more like kind of a drag and drop system so that people can kind of easily, without like low code or no code, kind of build things and stuff. And we in fact get a lot of companies that are like, hey, we're existing BroadSoft, but we have these opportunities and we can't figure out how to actually build this on BroadSoft. And so we dangle off BroadSoft also. So we're not saying, hey, rip out your BroadSoft system, but here's a simple, kind of gateway into your BroadSoft solution. Here's the open APIs, here's all the documentation, and here's this whole ecosystem of developers that can help you kind of get this to the next level. If that makes sense.
I think on CPaaS, one of the, Patrick made this point, is there is a fundamental difference. When Twilio, if you Trail-based in the market early on, was a developer focus. Here's an API, you can code to it. I think the market's evolved. We made an acquisition of IMI Mobile in the UK, and to Patrick's point, what we do with IMI and our WebEx Connect product now is it's the business user. So it's the product manager, the CMO. It is not necessarily developers. So I think that changed the market. So what we're seeing in Cisco is with our CPaaS strategy and why it's part of the overall platform strategy is it's opening up new buying centers in the enterprise. So you're talking to the networking or the telco person about UCaaS, you're talking to contact center about CCaaS, but CPaaS is almost this horizontal layer where you go into, like we're doing something with Google Business Messenger for AutoZone. So they're just saying, look, somebody's searching for a mechanic, and they just wanted the ability to, after you search for a mechanic, find the nearest AutoZone dealer and call them. So we enable that, right? But you can't say, hire a bunch of developers, take our APIs, do all that stuff. Large enterprises have IT organization, and Patrick's point, whether it's BroadSoft or the underlying platform, you can write to it. But the larger opportunity and why we acquired IMI was more about, at scale, you need the business outcome to drive it. You need to enable it, your business and others, the API layer. But to truly, the tipping point for us that we're starting to see is more business buyers looking at CPaaS as opposed to the IT person who wants to leverage an API. So.
And they're not buying CPaaS, they're buying a solution.
Business software, yeah.
Interesting. Brian, this, I mentioned earlier, this industry started with a real simple concept. You buy a software platform, you buy a perpetual licensing model, you build out your data center. Most of the companies in here have data center operations lips. You show up to the party and say, that's all obsolete, get rid of that, do a different approach. Why change a model that's proven?
Yeah, look, I think we've all been out, everybody that's in here, it's the Cloud Communications Alliance. We talk about, it starts with Cloud Communications Alliance, and we've been deploying cloud communication services to enterprises and convincing them the merits of ditching the PBX in the back office and moving to a cloud-first solution. At Allianz, we're saying, hey, as an industry, as a service provider community, the benefits of cloud apply to us too, and apply to the service provider. And how about the service provider, instead of deploying legacy hardware, perpetual licenses, stitching together a multi-vendor solution that you're then stuck with in market, how how about the cloud? Like, how about the agility of the cloud, the scalability of the cloud, security, the API, the extensibility? That's a really powerful concept that we're all really familiar with, but in some ways, like I feel like Alianza was maybe a decade early to the market. I mean, we launched the industry's first true cloud-native communications platform for service providers in 2010. And it just feels like finally, here we are in 2023, like the service providers are saying, all right, it's time for us to do this as well. And I think it creates this, it's really exciting opportunity for service providers that are trying to, like Mike talked about, reinvent themselves and think about what the future of communications looks like.
So do you think that service providers should even have a data center?
In an effort to be as, let's call it, maybe polarizing as possible, I'd say no, they don't need a data center anymore, any more than an enterprise needs to manage a PBX in their network closet. I think in some ways, if you can take the best of kind of the build approach where you manage a data center, which is high margin, high control, high visibility into the network, and you can combine that with the best of the cloud experience, which is product agility, innovation, extensibility, and you can provide a solution to an operator that brings both owner's economics, profitability with innovation, agility, speed to address customer demands. You've got kind of a best of both worlds, Goldilocks type solution that can really help service providers innovate, differentiate, and manage that balance between high profitability, sales growth, increased sales, decreased costs, in a way that is flexible from the cloud.
Is closing the data centers polarizing as Brian thinks?
I'm not sure it's opening or closing data centers. I think it's more what is your core competency. So I think some service providers, obviously service providers run large networks. They know how to do it. I think when you look at hyperscalers, whether it's AWS, GCP, or Azure, sorry. Wow, sorry. Freudian slip there. But no, look, I think there's a scale issue of what hyperscalers and public cloud companies do that's very different from, do you need data centers that are secure, that are in network, whether in the public sector? So there are opportunities. So I don't think it's an all or nothing. And then what can you leverage the hyperscalers for? What we are seeing service providers now pay more attention to is, I saw this new term, cloudflation, which is people started off experimenting, and then the amount of money they're paying starts to look larger and larger as the business grows, which is the business model. So now people are looking at saying, where do we use the hyperscalers for, and what is core to a service provider's business? Especially at the tier 1 level, that's a bigger conversation. What can we do, and where is our business, and where is our margin? So it's really a margin conversation every time we talk to a partner. So that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
I was going to say the same thing in the sense that a lot of service providers, they do want choice. And if you're just like, hey, we're only stuck on AWS, then you're kind of stuck with whatever AWS is going to give you. And when you're talking like the tier 1 service providers, they do have a choice, and they want the choice, and they might even have their own data centers, or they're like, hey, we have a tight partner with, Microsoft, and we only want to be on Microsoft, or we have a tight partnership with AWS, and we only want to be on AWS. So our viewpoint is, for service providers, they should have that choice to deploy their software where they want to, because they already have a lot of existing software in that data center, and if you already have, all your software in Microsoft or whomever, then you want to be able to have everything tightly coupled together and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, telcos are really, a lot of them want the control. I mean, they're operators. They've had networks that they've built for years and years and years, and that's they feel like their core competency. That's changing. It's telco is probably the last function to really embrace cloud. And rightfully there's security, there's regulatory concerns. I can't go into the UAE and say, yeah, just put it in a US data center. It's just not going to fly. So either in country or in their network is a requirement in many countries. But operators are relaxing, and we're having conversations about, all right, what functions are you ready to move to a cloud? Maybe it's the analytics that I spoke about before. Maybe it's what I call a trailing edge function, where I don't need to have that level of control like a voicemail or messaging platform. I think Allianz has had some good success with some of those non-strategic, analog lines and overhead paging and stuff like that, that I don't feel like, I have the resource to devote to manage that sort of legacy product suite, and it makes sense for me to let that go to a public cloud. So it's very nuanced response. It's not all.
Let's switch over to mobility. So much going on in the mobile world. We've got 5G, we've got a new generation, always a new generation of Wi-Fi. We've got satellites in the air that are getting closer to us. DP, what are you doing at Cisco to help service providers realize or benefit from the next generation of mobility?
Yeah. No, I think, look, mobile has been around for a while, and I think Mike had a slide on, mobile is one of the key drivers. Almost every service provider conversation we have globally starts around the CapEx investment, the spectrum investment they made in 5G, and what's the business case and how do they drive. So it will be application led. I think the change this time around is from a business model perspective, what we're seeing is more and more, if you look at WebEx calling and what we've done with it, service providers have said you can run WebEx calling in the cloud at Cisco, and then we'll partner with you. What we've done, and going back to the Broadworks case, is there are lots of service providers that have integrated the platform into the IMS core, into the actual network. So to build true differentiation as a service provider, you need the network, you need the device, you need the cloud layer that we provide. So our strategy now is very much to partner with service providers. So one of our most successful offerings is with Verizon. We have OneTalk, where it is a mobile-led service or a mobile-first service targeted at the SMB. Very successful because you come in and you lead with mobile. It adds mobile subscribers to Verizon, so they like that. But then we run the platform in terms of what the underlying UC component. So the $2 version of that, now we have WebEx Go and WebEx Mobile, where we partner with the service provider and say, for the needs of the market, where almost everyone leads with a mobile phone, like everyone has a desk phone, but you lead with a mobile phone, what are the applications and business models that you can drive from a mobile-first communication? I think at Cisco, that's probably our biggest push. So we're starting to see more and more service providers that we've deployed with WebEx Go. We're also starting to see upmarket in the enterprise, not just in SMB. Enterprises are now starting to say in certain verticals, financial services, legal, public sector, is I want all calls to go on a work number. So then you need to say, how do I secure it? How do I provide recording? How do I provide transcription? Then WebEx calling, what we're saying is we can do that with the service provider. We integrate into the core network. And it also allows service providers to differentiate, right? When you keep the calls on the network, on the mobile network, you have the ability to say, unlike a pure play internet hopping service, you are Verizon or Orange or Telstra. Like Telstra has a very successful service called Liberate, powered by Broadworks and by Cisco. That's the same model, but we see it moving up market. Enterprises, almost everyone, and depending on where in the world you are, the company-provided mobile phone versus the employee-owned phone is a very big difference. Almost all of us have our own mobile phone. It used to be before your company gave you because you were cool or you were in sales, but everyone has a mobile phone. So now what we're doing is we're saying, on the second SIM on your phone, iOS or Android, we provision the business line. And that allows the enterprise to say, I'm Dave, as I said, I can manage that service, I can be compliant, I can be secure. Very different from saying, Elka has got a mobile, I can call her and chat with her, but when we have a work conversation, certain verticals are leaning heavily into this with us. That's where we see the huge revenue opportunity for service providers.
If you see that photo of me on that wall, 12 years ago, I was on TechCrunch Disrupt. I was much younger then, had dreams of big things. And during TechCrunch Disrupt, yeah, I know, never forget. But, we actually were talking about building connectivity into the IMS core. Because the reality is, over-the-top apps, no offense to Microsoft Teams, if I'm on a Microsoft Teams over-the-top app call, it's awful. And that's nothing to do with Microsoft. It has everything to do with the actual network and how the data is not prioritized over the voice. voice and stuff. And so we've worked with multiple carriers to build tight integration into the IMS core so that your over-the-top app is not just necessarily going through the data network, but the voice is actually going through the voice part of the network to ensure call quality and stuff. And these are the kind of things that, we're constantly trying to push the boundaries of bringing all the different types of networks out there kind of, together. Just because an over-the-top, native app, or not native app, an over-the-top app in general just doesn't seem to be very good on the data network and stuff at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you've chronicled this, I'm sure you'll talk about, the sort of native mobility versus OTT, and I'll give a plug to Teams Phone Mobile, and one of the things that Azure for Operators bring is that glue into the IMS network between the Teams platform and the operator networks. We're working on that as well.
Any comments? Anyone?
Yeah, maybe just one more. I think one thing to keep in mind here is markets mature. It's natural for, I think, operators to pull from multiple solution providers. One thing that's important in that, though, is operator strategy around customer ownership, brand equity. And I think one of the things that Alianza brings to the table in this conversation is for customers that are being maybe pulled into an environment where they're now putting another brand forward, Microsoft brand forward, a Cisco brand forward. Alianza is giving them an option to maintain the service provider brand. In that type of, whether it's a mobile offering or a fixed offering, maintaining that customer relationship that's been important for them for a long time, and not necessarily waving the white flag and saying, all right, I'm ready to become the the dumb pipe that everybody's talking about, we're just reselling or becoming a channel partner, but really still maintaining that customer relationship with your brand.
I do think, one of the things to clarify from a Cisco perspective, it's always a service provider brand. It's sometimes it's co-branded, but it's Vonage, it's Verizon, it's Telstra. What we also see is sometimes we co-brand, but at the end of the day, your point about customer ownership, right? Like if you lead with access and connectivity, you own the customer and then you're overlaying apps. So I think customer ownership becomes a key thing, and that leads into cost of customer acquisition. In certain segments, it's service providers are better, in certain segments they're not. That I think is going to be an interesting game going forward. Where do you buy the service from? Is it from a vendor? Is it from a partner? That's also where I think there's a lot of opportunity for service providers. I'm very bullish on the future for service providers going forward.
I'll just add one thing. I think there may be some CCA surveys, some other survey on Washington data, but I think Frost did some reporting about the loyalty a small business has towards the operator versus the larger business. And generally, the larger business, it's the pull is the Cisco or Microsoft. That's who they have more the affinity to than the SMB. So, talking about lower cost of acquisition, if you are aligned with one of those known trusted brands in the enterprise, then that's going to reduce your acquisition costs and you can get more pull. The SMB, where the operator has more sway, they can bring a bundle, they can simplify that. So there's some nuance between markets.
Patrick, I was just thinking, you made the comment about TechCrunch. 2600 was one of the first to integrate. I think it was with Sprint, wasn't it?
Yep. The OGs. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you guys don't know who Sprint is,
Sprint?
don't worry about it.
That's what they are.
Yes, exactly. You learn a lot about how everything works back then. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the reality is for service providers, your number one asset is your name. And so if you're just reselling someone else, then eventually you're just going in at cost and you're going to lose. In the grand scheme of things. So, you always have to keep your name, and, no offense to Microsoft. But the reality is if, try to set up an auto antenna using your Microsoft Teams, I can't, so I don't know anybody else who can. So you still have a ton of opportunity to work with, I wouldn't say, hey, let's not sell Microsoft, let's not sell Cisco, let's not sell any of them. But you come in with everything under your own name saying, hey, we've done an integration with Microsoft, we've done an integration with Cisco or phones. But this is still my name and this is still my brand. And that's the only way, you're going to be around 10 years from now. And if you're just fully like, hey, I'm a Cisco provider, no offense to Cisco, eventually you're just competing against all the other Cisco providers. And that's something that be 10 years now. So.
Excellent.
Dave, quick question.
Sanjay.
Maybe for VP, or anybody. The mobility
US versus international. Where do you see the differences, if any?
So I think
The question is about the differences in mobility internationally versus domestically.
yeah, I think we're almost like it's the 2.0 version, right? I think 1.0 with GSM, Europe, back to the Sprint, like I think originally Nokia dominated the market. So I think international was ahead in mobile. But I think in terms of 5G, both from a spectrum, I think public policy and regulatory, the US is ahead. Is that your question?
No, I mean, like this notion of a mobile dialer is sufficient, the dual SIM or that.
I think international, well, we do a lot of Telenor, all the Scandinavian operators are our partners, whether it's Telia and the others. So when you talk to European operators, it's not a conversation of is mobile, when mobile. They're all in on mobile. It is mobile first. So now they're looking at how do we drive more ARPU out of mobile? How do we get into enterprise? That's where the second SIM, what are the services? So if you look even at the services we provide on, I would argue that what's pushing the WebEx app further on mobility applications is some of the work we do with our Scandinavian operators from just an actual differentiation in the market. So they're further ahead. In terms of integration into the network, we're integrated already with Verizon, with AT&T and stuff. I think now it's a go-to-market conversation on how do you market the service. So is it just if you just say, do you want a second SIM? No one knows what a SIM is other than people in the industry. I think it's a question of are you selling business services? Outside the US, I think Telstra has a very successful service. It's Liberate, very mobile-centric service on how they go to market. We're now working with a Japanese operator as well. And for them, it's very much actually a mobile service because it's very app-centric, right? So from that perspective, we're seeing operators lean into how do we leverage the core network? And you talked about like in differentiation. It's not that US operators are behind. I think the market, like in Europe and other places, is much further wrong. One big change, I think, between US and other markets is the US operators have the muscle to lock the SIM in most cases in the US. Hurdle of adoption, friction in the customer acquisition process. Europe with its GSM routes, all SIMs, all devices open. So you have the ability to go in. That's a big customer acquisition. How can I create a frictionless experience? That is, I don't know if it's in a question, Sanjay.
I do want to get some more questions from the audience, but I want to get this question in first. Michael mentioned that the industry is mature. I thought it wasn't brand new, but he said it's 25 years old and it's time to reassess things. So earlier, the platform choice the service provider made was all the difference in the world. The question is, does it matter now? Is there really any difference between the platform vendors? I suspect you guys think there is. So let's start off with Chris.
Yeah, one of my early jobs before joining a vendor was as a CLEC. I came up in the CLEC boom in the late 90s and as either Nortel or Lucent. And I think platform does matter, but really at the end, it is about execution of that operator. So, my company, didn't go bankrupt and we survived and we did well, not because we chose Nortel over Lucent, just because we were very focused and we executed. So all of us here, like I said at the outset,
I mean, one makes your opportunities one of the but the reality is and so you have this power mode, you have partners or more can't do technology has gone to the point where it kind of makes that thing together. So, I think from maximum of what your target audience and what you're aiming for. But the reality is, you really can, kind of mix and match things based on your go-to-market opportunities.
So I think from a Cisco perspective, platforms do matter, but it's so much, if you look at, again, back to where does a service provider make money is what can you do with the platform and how do you create value on top of the platform. So a lot of the conversations we're having with our partners is, obviously we believe WebEx is the best platform out there, but we talk to partners, it becomes a question of what are the value-added services, what is the differentiation, and it's really, as you see, it's cloud connections, as you see this migration to the cloud, there's also a movement of the margin contribution changes from where the margin pools are. So as you move the margin pool into the value-added service, where it wasn't about Fios, it's about the Netflix service, and you look at who's got margin, I think that's where the platform matters. If you lock yourself too much into it's about the platform, then I think there's not enough room for service providers to make money and to be profitable. So our emphasis really, talk about APIs and what can we provide. So we're seeing more and more service providers working with us on saying, how do I leverage your contact center APIs, or how do I leverage our CPaaS to build value on top of your platform? So it's not just a one platform, it's what can you do with the platform? Obviously, we believe there'll be 2 to 3 major platform players, which is why very much we view WebEx as a platform where you have calling, you have meetings, you have contact center and devices, and then we work with the partner to say, okay, we know where our margin profile is, but are there other pools of margin that we can jointly own? So I think it's really a question around where is the money flowing, and how do we enable our partners to get their fair share of it, while we as a platform provider also get part of the margin.
Right?
Agree with everything that's been said. I think how I frame it maybe just slightly differently. Platform decision does matter, but it matters less and less all the time as an industry matures. Early in an industry, platform differentiation is a feature comparison that we all did, that this platform versus that platform, and which has the most features and how do these line up. And even you kind of see that today in some of the different web meetings and cloud meetings platforms, which one has breakout rooms, which one has recording, which one has transcription. As the market matures, the different experiences that the platforms provide at that granular feature functionality level will be undifferentiable. And I think over time, whether it's a Teams meeting, a Zoom meeting, a WebEx meeting, it's a URL. And we all click on it and we all have the ability to jump into any one of those meetings. I think the differentiation from a service provider perspective is in the delivery of that feature functionality. And that differentiation does matter. And fundamentally, whether you're managing a multi-vendor environment versus managing a cloud app that under your brand is a different experience for you. And I think this comes down to service provider strategy and how are they going to differentiate their business going forward? Do they see owning and operating a platform as a strategic benefit? Does it position their products differently? I think the answer to that is over time, it's less and less so. And it's about how do I free up resources, mind power, energy inside my organization to think about go-to-market, verticalization, really meeting a customer experience need. And the calories and brain power expended on managing a network in a multi-vendor environment, I don't think increasingly as the market matures lend itself to differentiation and competitive advantage.
So we're technically out of time, but the next session, then the guy can wait. So I want to see if there's any questions in here. I'll open up if there's any questions. Any questions for our panel? Oh, please.
So we talked about mobile, but several operators have mostly fixed line businesses. How can you all help? Or what's the strategy? How can they play in the mobile side when they don't have, because most of the mobile is pretty much by the large operators, right?
Yeah.
And we all know that we're using the UC apps more and more on the mobile side, like meetings, everything on the mobile. How can the fixed line operators kind of get into that?
So the question is, how can you help your service providers leverage fixed line services for differentiation?
Yeah, how do they work with mobile?
How can they get in, how can they leverage mobile without owning the mobile network?
Exactly.
Yeah, so perfect question. I think some of the stuff, we talked about WebEx Mobile and Go, and what we're doing is, you see more and more service providers, you mentioned Lubin, they own the physical, on the fixed line, but they don't own a mobile network, unlike a T-Mobile or which used to be Sprint, and AT&T. Well, what we're seeing is you can launch a service that enables the mobile network without owning the core mobile network. So you're starting to see whole new services that can be launched. on the consumer side, you could argue WhatsApp has a very large base. They're a mobile service on a mobile device. They don't own the core network. They're able to build a brand. Obviously, it was a free service, so there's a question of economics. So I think we're starting to see enterprises now saying, I want a service that spans multiple mobile network operators. So by definition, you're abstracting the network layer. So we actually see, and we're working with a few providers, one of them is not even a telco looking at entering the space of saying, can I come in and provide everything to do with mobile service from billing to devices to cost management, and then provide this as a service. So I actually think you'll see more providers. You see Dish Network in the US, what they're doing with their 5G capability. They don't own necessarily mobile network. You're seeing more players. The MVNO word used to be a buzzword in the past. I think you'll see more of second generation services that are on a mobile network, not necessarily by the MNO. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets to the international question too. I mean, in Europe, France is a much more vibrant MVNO, MVNE ecosystem versus here in the US. I think that will evolve with more players, and that will open up mobility to more fixed providers.
But I think network economics are a very key thing. The challenge of the MVNO model is economics.
Let me see, is there any other questions? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
How do you feel the struggle with hybrid work, which is continuing between going back to the office, staying in the office? Can you affect, I think, or anything about how that's affecting?
Yeah, it's hybrid work, just a buzzword, or is there actually something behind it?
Is anyone here not working today while you're remote from your office? So I think the world's changed. By the way, I just got a tweet that I guess the Republicans have introduced a bill in Congress that would, I don't know if force is the word, but strongly insist that government employees should be at work on site. So I think there are these trends and movements where people are starting to say, hey, let's go back to the old way of working. I think it's just changed. It doesn't mean everybody's sitting, on a beach in Fort Lauderdale working. It means that you're going to see the spectrum, but I do think we have changed fundamentally at a global level. I think our phrase that we use at Cisco is work is what you do, not where you do it. That applies more to the knowledge worker more than it is the frontline. You can't be a barista from your home office. You have to be in the coffee shop. But I think globally there's been a resetting of what it means to be at work. That I don't see changing, Jeff. But each country, each market, each vertical is looking at it in a different way, whether it's 2 days at work or some portion of the workforce. I think this has been the biggest boon to us as an industry over the last 2 years. But I think now the 2.0 version of it has even more opportunity.
And I think that's the opportunity for the service provider. I think I said at the outset, hybrid work is a buzz, but it is a reality. The enterprises, businesses are looking for, how do I align my estate now into these new requirements, right? I got all these fixed phones at an office that no one goes to anymore. I've got a whole slew of home office workers. I know it's kind of, I don't want to speak for Poly and HP, but I perceive they want to sort of be the home office enablers. So, you have an opportunity to bring the broadband connectivity, if that's part of your portfolio, and help the business say, all right, here's how you're going to right-size your business and save some costs from them in the process.
All right. Well, with that, please take my panel.
You guys, before you leave, can we get
A picture.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah,
We'll be signing autographs.
Yeah.
We're all in.
No, give me a smile. And ready, set. One more time. Perfect, guys.
Thank you.
That's why this agenda was Snyder when I said that.
Does it all, everything digital. Use it internal. It's being provided by one MSP.
Okay. Yeah.
You get paid overtime for doing two.
Okay, let's go ahead and start off with the next session on mobility. This microphone, all right.
No, we don't break.
So I guess I introduce myself. UCaaS Mobility 3.0. And the old saying at Microsoft was, if you remember the early days of Microsoft, was version 3 was the one that mattered. You had to wait for version 3. And I think UCaaS Mobility 3 is actually pretty significant. So let's get into this. My name is Dave Michaels. I've got here my Twitter handle. Evan, right in front of me, that's a cartoon below. Evan and I do a podcast, usually about 2 episodes a month. We've had 2 of our keynote. We've had Michael Tesler. We've had Thomas Frey on Talking Heads podcast. You can subscribe to Talking Heads for free on your mobile apps, podcast apps. We just posted one with Jeff Lawson from Twilio. We try to get, what we tell people is the most interesting people in the industry, plus we have good guests. Okay, so I also do a video with Zeus. Some of you know Zeus. We call it real time recorded, kind of a recap of news. We do it when we feel like it. And I published the Insider Report. You've been getting a couple of Insider Reports for this. I have a free version. I have a paid version, and my own brand is Talking Points. So with the Talking Points brand, last June 27th, I published a report where I started using the term UCaaS Mobility 3. The report was based on an observation from Enterprise Connect in March of 22, that there were, for the first time in my opinion, 3 keynotes that talked about UCaaS Mobility 3, and it was the first time I kind of heard of this. So 3 keynotes, that was one from Microsoft, one from Cisco, and one from RingCentral. And so I published the No Jitter post on it, I published a research note on it, and I'm pretty excited about this because we see a lot of innovation in technology. We see a lot of innovation in unified communications. A lot of things are just easy to emulate. You know, blurred camera backgrounds or breakout rooms came up earlier. It's like once a vendor decides we have to add this feature, it's not that long until that feature pops up and propagates across the industry. This one's going to be a little trickier. I do expect a lot of propagation to follow, but it's going to be a little harder to pull this one off. So what is UCaaS Mobility 3? Over the past 15 years or so, or I guess Mike would say 25 years, yikes, there's been 2 dominant themes in enterprise communications. The rise of UCaaS, and I don't remember when we started using the term UCaaS. You could probably remember we started with hosted voice or hosted PBX, and it gradually expanded. We had the whole prem to cloud conversation. We had what is UCaaS conversation. The leaders all changed. I've got there Avaya, Nortel, Ericsson, Alcatel-Lucent. Cisco got in the game around 2000. Microsoft got in the game around 2010. Zoom popped out of nowhere. RingCentral takes credit for all of this. We saw voice data convergence happen. There was a big conversation. I remember Blair and I going back and forth on what is convergence, and what does it mean when all of a sudden your PC can make phone calls. And there were all this new ideas, click to dial, integration, CTI integration, all kinds of new stuff popping up when this generation or this revolution started. We saw hosted voice expand into meetings and messaging. We saw WebRTC, which is mentioned here, that we can pretty much click to join any meeting now from the browser. And we've also seen broadband become ubiquitous. So it's been a very interesting journey. The rise of the smartphone started in 2007. The famous Steve Jobs launching the iPhone, it'll always be remembered. Again, we saw the leaders change. Anyone remember Steve Ballmer making fun of the launch of the iPhone? It'll never work. Business users want a keyboard. This thing's doomed to fail. I understood where he was coming from. I mean, it made sense. I wouldn't buy a phone without a keyboard. I didn't know about touch capacitive screens. That had not been invented yet. And so the things changed pretty quickly. And we saw new stars, Apple and Samsung. And reality is that mobility has been a key part of the UCaaS story for a long, long time. And the UCaaS speeds, of course, the wireless speeds have gotten much better. So as a result, UCaaS and mobility really go together hand in hand. We see a lot of phones now from the phone vendors like Cisco that are running Android. They don't say that necessarily, but they call it WebOS or WebXOS like that. But it's an Android basis, and they're not the only ones doing that. We're seeing the form factors changing. Poly's got a monitor with a built-in camera, built-in speakers, built-in camera speakers and microphones, just like your cell phone has. And we're seeing this convergence, and you know, you look at the screens, the pictures on these screens, I think it's just kind of funny because this stuff is really becoming very blurry. And we've had some questions in the last session about mobility and stuff. Clearly, we're doing more and more of our UC and UCaaS on our smart devices. So how does the industry embrace mobility? Carefully, because we're in the communications business and the wireless providers are in the communications business. And there's a little bit of, you know, we've heard it from everybody, right? You walk into a, oops, careful of that microphone. You walk into a prospect and they say, I don't even know why we need a phone system. Everything I need is right here. How many of you have heard that? I mean, we've all heard, yeah. There's a lot of confusion about what is the difference between these systems. So the UCaaS industry embraced mobility, what I would call 1.0, and it was what I call creative call forwarding. Simultaneous ringing was the killer feature. And so it's like you can take your call anywhere, and it was actually pretty clever. And it was pretty easy to receive calls this way. A little harder to make calls, but we had some pretty good solutions around that. I remember Mitel had a solution where you dialed into the PBX, and then you put in the phone number you wanted to call, then it would substitute the outbound caller ID so that the outbound call would show the work number instead of your cell number and stuff like that. But pretty creative call forwarding was generation 1. Now, I've simplified this down to 3 generations. If you talk to the mobile operators, they'll say it's like 37 generations of mobility. But at a big picture level, 3 generations. The second generation is largely where the industry is at today. Patrick made a comment about Teams. OTT doesn't work very well in that last session. It's not just Teams. OTT, over-the-top apps, don't work very well. They work great at home. I have a soft phone on my desktop. They work great at home. They work great in some coffee shops. They don't work particularly well on a smartphone, particularly if you're mobile. In other words, the UCaaS industry says our mobile solution works great if you're not mobile. And it really is the standard. Pretty much every UC and UCaaS company has some sort of app ecosystem or primary app that allows them to make calls, allows them to do messaging, allows them to do directory lookup, allows them to do meetings. And it works pretty well if you have great bandwidth. Now, a lot of you can relate to a situation I just had recently where I went to the dentist, got a phone call on my work number over the top, and it was a bad connection. It was just really bad. So we're struggling. And I said, well, let's try it again. So he calls me back and it rings again. And it's just terrible. And I said to him, just call me on my direct cell number. Have you ever done that? I mean, seriously, have you ever done that? We all do that. The industry knows that over the top doesn't work particularly well. And I wasn't even driving. When you start driving and your signal's just completely changing as you go up and down the highways, OTT just doesn't work very well. The reason OTT doesn't work very well is because it's over the top. It's not just over the top the internet like we do with a lot of other apps. It's 2 over the tops. You've got to go over the top, unprioritized on the wireless side, And then once you get to the carrier's ground station, then it's over the top, over their internet. And there's a lot of delay there. One of the things I mentioned, simultaneous ring. Sometimes you can't even answer your UCaaS phone because it rang 3 times on your desk and you only got half a ring on your cell phone. And so over the top is just lots of problems. And we put up with it because there's not a lot of choice, and it's the best we can do. And it's, like I said, the current default. So, let's see, it works well. Let's see, I covered all this already. That's not sufficient. Okay, covered that. Look at that, I covered all this, way ahead of myself. And the bottom line is, users skip it. That's the important part, because one of the big benefits, if you go into a UCaaS presentation, a UCaaS demo for one of your new vendors you're looking at, it's not going to take them very long to start pushing the mobile app. They're going to say, look what you can do. You can control your outbound caller ID. You can make it where you can work from anywhere. You can do all these wonderful things, and it's a big lie. It just doesn't work because the employees reject it. They won't use it. This is, by the way, if you talk, we could talk about what's it called? Net neutrality. Net neutrality really is just about pure internet, not so much about mobility, but it's the same type of thing. The carrier's network, the carriers get the benefit from a better network. The native, why does your native dialer work better than the over-the-top dialer? Because it's prioritized over the carrier network. It's built in. These smartphones, second word of smartphone is phone. These are phones. And we're asking our users, don't use it that way. Go into an app, start the app, and then use it that way. It's not even intuitive. So, big lie. UCaaS Mobility 3. So what's happening here is that the wireless carriers are working now with the UCaaS providers to help them create a better wireless service, a wireless experience. They're putting the UCaaS number natively on the cell. And DP talked about it, Microsoft talked about it, Chris talked about it. They're pairing it to a SIM, and it's the native number. You can now use the native dialer on the smartphone, or not. You can still go into the app and make calls that way. The app has more features. Maybe you want to use a directory or check something else. So you can use it either way. The important part is, while the app works, it's not required. It doesn't even require a smartphone, because every cell phone has a SIM, and so it's paired with the SIM. It could be a single SIM phone, it could be just a work phone, or it could be a dual SIM phone, and it could be a personal phone and a work phone. It's currently done basically in one of 2 ways, and I'm sure there'll be even more coming in the future. But right now, it's currently done with either a direct integration, where the wireless provider is natively or in the background, in the back office, integrating with the UCaaS provider, or they're doing it with an MVNO. And the result is, it's one comm solution for the customer that covers everything from desk phones to soft phones to smartphones. And an admin for Teams can, with the new solution that was just announced from Verizon, can log into the Teams console and move users and move phones between any of these devices, any and or these devices. And it's completely native. So this is fairly significant. In other words, the lie that we've been selling for 2 decades is now reality. And there's going to be some shakeups. So the benefits of UCM3, I don't know how to abbreviate UCaaS. UC seems to work, but that's a hard one. How do you abbreviate an acronym? So now we have an answer. Why do I even need a phone system? Well, we know the answer to why I need a phone system, because you might have call centers, you might have various specialized use cases where a lot of your employees still need a phone system. But we're asking customers to buy a phone system, a UCaaS solution, and we're asking them to buy a cellular solution. Now they can buy one solution, one vendor, one provider for everything. We're solving the BYOD problem. BYOD has been a head scratcher for a while. who owns the phone, if the customer, if the employee owns the phone, can we install software on it, we have rights to their call logs. It's just a whole quagmire of issues around BYOD. We solved that by two SIMs. The calls that take place on the company SIM, like in the WebEx example, are fully visible and tracked and logged in the WebEx portals. The calls that are made on the personal SIM are not. Employees understand this. Employees know that their activities are going to be tracked, and things that they want to be tracked will certainly be on the corporate side. This also solves the Disneyland problem. Once you give out your personal cell phone number, it's really hard to enjoy a day at Disneyland with your family. You have to keep your cell phone on because your family's going to get lost and they're going to call you, and you're going to keep on getting work calls. But if you can maintain the separation of work and personal, then you can turn off and not available on the work phone. It solves BYOD accounting issues. The company will pay for the second SIM, not the first SIM. It solves the logging issue. It solves the single device issue. How many employees carry two devices so they don't want to put software on the phone? It solves the work from anywhere problem. It solves the intuitive use case. Hey, you can actually use the dialer to make a phone call. You want to dial a phone call? Use the dialer. Prioritize traffic and signaling, not over the top, so it's actually getting a pretty good experience. And I mentioned this earlier, you can use the native app or not. And it's actually interesting. There's an assumption people don't want to use the native app. There are times when the native, the over-the-top app, the installed app, has benefit. I mentioned the directory, or maybe you want to look at chat conversations or something like that. So people will use whatever they want. Opens up new opportunities for frontline workers. We've seen Workplace by Facebook come into the enterprise. Basically, it's a chat app. We've seen a lot of organizations deploying chat apps in their enterprise, but they have no way of enabling a phone call. And so here you can mix and match, give everybody a messaging app, and give the people that need it a mobile app, a mobile phone call. There's also, Michael mentioned verticals. I just had a plumber come out to my house. And the plumbers are afraid to call you. They're running late or whatever. They're afraid to call you because they don't want to give out their cell number. This solves that problem as well. And so there's a lot of benefits to EC3. Now, some of the disruptive impacts here, as I mentioned earlier, suddenly there can be one provider. Verizon currently has a US exclusive with Microsoft Teams. Verizon doesn't even sell Microsoft. And so this is interesting. You have to buy your Microsoft license from somebody else, but we're going to see people that are on AT&T or T-Mobile that have Teams enterprise deployments. We're going to see them migrate over to Verizon. That's the strategy of Verizon. Suddenly, wireless providers are not just dumb pipes. They're actually adding a lot more value. When they're over the top situation, they're just dumb pipes. This is going to accelerate UCaaS consolidation. We're going to see a lot of companies, a lot of organizations want this feature. They don't really know it is available yet. It hasn't really been properly launched yet. I believe that this year that's going to happen. Microsoft and Verizon are two very big companies that like to spend money on advertising. I believe this differentiation is going to become clear this year. And that bottom point there is really important. For the first time ever, Cisco is using the MVNO approach. For this first time ever, Cisco is now in a position to be the single provider for a global enterprise for everything, for telephony, meetings, messaging, mobility, and hardware. So when you get that WebEx Go SIM on your phone, you get a local number, whatever country you're in. The top of your phone says WebEx. It doesn't say Verizon or AT&T. It says WebEx. And anywhere you go, it's going to work. The MVNO, basically, it's a function of roaming agreements. And so that's a pretty easy thing to negotiate. It's not like the direct integration where they have to really do a lot of technical testing. It's more of a contract. I don't believe Cisco has global availability yet, but they could get there pretty quick. They're available in a lot of countries. Current offers, One Talk, I gotta give credit to One Talk. Came up earlier, surprising came up, I didn't even knew about it. But BroadSoft and Verizon developed One Talk several years ago, way ahead of their time. That was pretty much, to my understanding, the first UC Mobility 3 offer. Didn't really go anywhere. Nobody understood it, and Verizon branded it, and Verizon didn't know how to sell it. It's still available, it's out there, it works great, it came up earlier, it works great. It's not a full UCaaS suite, it's a pretty limited UCaaS suite, but it's the same value proposition, native number, smartphone, desktop, and software. AT&T Office at Hand by RingCentral has this available today. Cisco calls theirs WebEx Go. RingCentral's also announced a partnership with Vodafone in Europe that's rolling it out into many European countries. Microsoft Teams was already launched earlier this year with Telia in Sweden and Rogers in Canada, and now, of course, Verizon. More to come. I can only talk about announced items here, but let's go through the list. So we've got 8x8. They haven't made any announcements yet, but I'm sure they're looking at this. Crescendo in the room. Crescendo struck an interesting partnership last year with Mavenir. That was really around CPaaS. And, but Mavenir and Crescendo together have all the tools to create this. They won't tell me what they're talking about, but these guys won't tell me what they're talking about. And Mavenir doesn't talk. They don't. Okay, so Dialpad has not announced anything. I want to point out that Dialpad is resold by T-Mobile today, and T-Mobile is an investor in Dialpad, T-Mobile Ventures. Google hasn't announced anything, and they already have an MVNO. But they, and I doubt they will announce anything, by the way. GoTo hasn't announced anything, but they're actually very strong in certain markets that are very mobile centric. Vonage is an interesting one. Vonage, again, has not said anything publicly about this. But if anyone noticed, they got acquired last year by Ericsson. And Ericsson is a leader in cellular infrastructure, wireless infrastructure, 5G infrastructure. And Ericsson keeps making noise about how they're going to use Vonage to get into the enterprise. And Zoom hasn't made any announcements yet. And so AT&T has two solutions, one from WebEx and one from RingCentral. Verizon has Microsoft, T-Mobile has not said anything. Let's see here. So that's the end of my session on mobility, which is right on time here. I mentioned my insider reports. I got a new one going out today, as a matter of fact. It used to be monthly format, now they're going to go out more frequently. And I'm doing a promo code for CCA members. It's normally a $5,500 subscription for the premium edition, and doing a promo code to the end of the month for CCA 23. And thank you.